It's a year since George Floyd's death unleashed a revolution in America, but sadly it has not been a positive one. Calls to defund the police led to budget cuts, not only in Minneapolis, but coast to coast, from New York to Los Angeles. Police morale has collapsed. Criminals have been empowered with the totally predictable and predicted consequence, a massive rise in violent crime. In Los Angeles, shootings up 73%. In New York, up 97%. In Minneapolis, a 250% increase in gunshot victims. Who's hurt the most? Black and Latino Americans. In New York last June, 97% of shooting victims were minorities. In Los Angeles, according to the police chief, nearly all shooting victims in the 2020 crime surge were in black and brown communities. Listen to this report from Minneapolis. The sound of gunfire has become so familiar in one predominantly black neighborhood that residents have grown numb to it. Now, even the Democrat politicians who a year ago pandered to defund the police activists are coming to their senses and reversing their reckless, dangerous undermining of the police. But there's another consequence of the protests a year ago that could be even more destructive. The protests helped advance a cause that has been trying for 100 years to occupy the commanding heights of American life. That cause is wokeism, which in the space of just 12 months has become the new religion, not just of the left, but our corrupt and decadent establishment too. You see it in the woke corporations cravenly mouthing BLM propaganda. McDonald's changed their Twitter handle to amplifying black voices. Companies including Lockheed Martin indoctrinated their workforces with racist training programs. Coca-Cola took time out from their main mission of destroying black people's health to spread lies and misinformation about voting reforms. You see it in the total capitulation of the Democratic Party to the woke agenda. Democrats fighting to end policing, abolish the Department of Homeland Security, destroy girls' sports, manipulating our language to push their divisive woke narrative. They don't even understand what they're talking about anymore. Wokeism is not some benign, soft attempt to promote peace and harmony. It's the exact opposite. As we have explained, it is the product of a 100-year-long effort to undermine and tear down the values and ideals and freedoms that this country was built on. It started in Germany, 1923, at the Institute for Social Research, part of Frankfurt University's Goethe Institute. A group of Marxist philosophers got together to debate a central question. Why did the working class revolutions predicted by Marx and Engels not sweep the world? Their main conclusion: the proletariat were held back by family, religion, and culture. These three things, they argued, were the building blocks of bourgeois society, used by the elite to keep the masses oppressed. So they invented a new theory, which explained all this, and explained how to dismantle those building blocks. It was called critical theory. Many of these Frankfurt School philosophers, as they became known, eventually made their way across the Atlantic to New York, where they took up residence at Columbia University's sociology department. Critical theory became critical race theory. It grew and spread throughout the 1970s, 80s, and 90s to become the dominant on-campus ideology that we see today. This is what these useful idiots in corporate America, the Democratic Party, and the media are embracing. They have become the pathetic stooges of our #1 domestic threat, the real enemy within. The tragedy of it all is that we do need to do more to address racial injustice in America. On median income, the gap between white and black Americans is over $30,000. The average white household has nearly 18 times as much wealth as the average black household. 3/4 of white Americans own their own home. For black Americans, it's less than half. High school graduation rates are 9% higher for white students. And, perhaps the most destructive, more black people in jail, even though there are more than 5 times as many white Americans as black Americans. But what's the real explanation for all this? The most pervasive cause of racial injustice in America is not racist white people, it's the policies of the Democrats that incentivize single parenthood, lock kids in schools that fail to give them a decent education, policies that destroy community jobs. So, what's the best, most positive, most practical solution to racial injustice? Not the shallow virtue signaling of woke CEOs or guilty white allies, but conservative ideas like stable families, school choice, home ownership, and the kind of criminal justice reform led by President Trump. You want opportunity and social mobility for black kids in America? Make sure they're raised in a stable, loving home. If you're born in the bottom 20% of the income scale, your chances of reaching the top 20% are 4 times higher if your parents stay married. Marriage makes a massive difference in keeping families stable. On average, if parents are married, 3/4 are still together by the time their child is 12. If they were just living together, it's only 1/4. You want to close the racial income and wealth gap? Close the racial education gap. In California, public schools, totally controlled by the teacher unions, as we saw in the pandemic, there's the equivalent of a 4-year achievement gap between black and white 8th grade students. In Seattle, the education gap is so embarrassingly wide, they've stopped reporting the data. Whereas students from LA charter schools are far more likely to be eligible for state universities than their peers in union-run schools. And Seattle charter school students gained the equivalent of between 30 and nearly 60 more days of learning. If black lives really mattered to the Democrats, they'd back these kinds of reforms, but they don't. They block them. Gavin Newsom, so pleased with himself and his sanctimonious BLM virtue signaling, is trying to shut down charter schools, the very schools that help black kids the most. We need to help black people in America climb the ladder of opportunity, and the first step is to fix the rungs broken by disastrous Democrat policy. But it's not just about policy, it's about our culture too. If black lives really mattered to the woke CEOs and the media and the activists, they'd use their platforms to promote a culture of achievement and success. Researchers have established with data what the pathway out of poverty is. It's called the success sequence. Get at least a high school diploma, get a job, get married before having children. Only 3% of millennials who followed this success sequence were in poverty by the time they reached adulthood. We can teach this, promote this, put money behind the message, finish high school, get a job, get married. That's what we need in this country, not the nihilistic, divisive, anti-American poison of wokeism, which paints every black person as a victim and every white person an oppressor. And at the heart of it all, we need to rebuild the American family, the very thing that wokeism is aiming to destroy. So, as we mark the anniversary of this social upheaval, let's say clearly that conservatives should lead this fight, the fight against wokeism and the fight for equal opportunity for every American, regardless of race.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.